Without doubts, I think it's by far the best league in the world.
How dare you score like that in the Premier League? Mission accomplished in the Premier League. The American.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Premier League Show brought to you by AS TV. I am your host, Gally, and I am joined by my co-host, Bickler. How are you today, my friend?
It's April 1st. A lot of shenanigans and a lot of work bullshit, but we're here.
There is a lot of shenanigans and a lot of work bullshit. I wish some of it were fool's jokes on my part, and none of it were. It was just shenanigans and bullshit at work. But we're here to talk a little bit about the Premier League weekend that was match week 31. Very, very interesting, or 30, I'm sorry. Very, very interesting match week. As we like to do, we look at all the fixtures on the screen. Like usual, the Premier League made sure that matches had to end with only 10 men on the pitch. We'd have controversy and arguments over all of them. And you know what? Let's just start, because people will talk about the awful officiating in the Liverpool-Brighton match, and it was bad. But I would argue it was really poor all across the board, maybe a little bit more slighted towards Brighton, but they had a lot of calls go against them that were terrible as well, because it was just a poorly officiated match by a bad match day official. But I want to talk to you about the Chelsea-Burnley match, because it's arguably everything that's wrong with the Premier League. And more importantly, it's also everything great about the Premier League. So, Paul, take me through, because I'm sure you were probably watching that match like most of us were, through the highlights, lowlights, and basically the story untold, brought to you by Goal Zone on the Peacock channel.
Yeah, so I guess the two things that stood out to me were, like, we were watching just Darren England just make an absolute hash of this thing, right? With quite possibly the softest second yellow you'll ever see. A, B, then completely scrapping the double/triple jeopardy rule and giving a card for a penalty that shouldn't have been a penalty anyway. So
just VAR doing nothing to help.
Just two people fumbling around in a dark closet on this. And then the second thing, so that was the first thing. And I kept thinking, it's almost so bad that the refereeing in England has almost become like the great equalizer, where you just never know what's going to happen. Everyone has a chance because some crazy shit can happen with the officiating that turns a game on its head. And then the other thing I was thinking is, I can't think of a more just fascinating car wreck than the fact that Chelsea is going to fumble through this thing and meet United this week, who basically did the exact same thing, figured out a way to not win a game versus an inferior opponent. And it's like two teams that can't get out of their own way. So it's going to be interesting, but yeah, dude, what a mess that was. Holy cow.
It was just a craziness. And then, Vincent Kompany gets sent off. No blame on him. I don't blame him.
Nope.
Got to be frustrated. Here you are.
I thought he was classy. I thought he was classy. I would have been a lot worse.
And I mean, he got the red, and it was, he gets the straight red, and the way in which he did it. It was craziness. So talk about a little bit about the match. Obviously, Cole Palmer scores the goal on the penalty that is the soft penalty. Had already scored the first goal. Another just great performance for Cole Palmer. If it wasn't for Cole Palmer, I don't know where Chelsea would be. They'd literally probably be in 16th or 17th, and they'd really have nothing to look forward to the future. And in some ways, I just wonder how long he just looks at himself and is like, what am I doing? If I had maybe stuck out one more year at City, would I have fought my way into the lineup? And if I ever got a chance, what would it have been? But he's at Chelsea, and he's scoring his goals. Obviously, Burnley, They were scrappy. They fought. They really clawed in. It was a really terrible play by the keeper on the corner that led to the tying goal. So, it's what you need when you're down to 10 men and you have inferior talent. Can Burnley pull anything from this, or, was not getting 3 points here basically Burnley's probably fatal flaw?
I think it's a little bit like Sheffield, where this is like draws a nice feeling, right? But it's just too little too late. And in fact, I shouldn't say nice feeling because both these teams really lost those 3 points, right? But I think in a weird way, like Burnley had a little bit of a rougher hand to deal with. But I just feel like, it's too little too late at this point. Like, I don't think a point's enough down there, especially considered that both Sheffield and Burnley have considerably deeper holes than like Luton or like a Forest, right?
So another crazy match from the weekend was the first match of the weekend, which was Newcastle-West Ham, where West Ham decided to run out to a 3-1 lead just to allow Newcastle to win 4-3. Like, is this more about Eddie Howe's inability to, get any semblance of order at Newcastle? Is this about David Moyes being too David Moyes because your team ran out to a 3-1 lead, so just go for the fourth and kill the game off, but instead he tried to defend it and in turn found a way to lose it? Like, which manager has more to answer to their supporters on April Fool's Day?
I mean, I definitely think it's West Ham. I think, Newcastle has the added, European comps. They have all the injuries they're dealing with. Shoot, the dude that comes on and wins it, Harvey Barnes, coming off, he's getting fit again, comes on as a substitute for the substitute. And I mean, that's how bad off, Newcastle's entire back line is gone.
I mean, they lost Lacazelle's, and it's an ACL injury. He's out for like a year.
Yep, and then you got Livermore behind him. You got Trippier already out. Almiron comes on and gets injured. So then you got to hit, it's just I've always been a little bit of a defender of Moyes, and I think he's better than, a lot of people give him credit for. He gets a lot of unnecessary stick, in my opinion, maybe at least because he's Scottish and he deserves it. I don't know. But I think at this point, if you're Moyes, you're running out of excuses here. Like, this is finally a team that's built itself to the point with his guys. I think it's a considerably more talented team than West Ham has seen in a decade. Like, I think that this team has got some real grit to it. It's got some real talent to it. I think you're going to love this. I thought Kudus was far and away the best person on the entire pitch. That assist for the third goal to Jared Bowen, where he basically just runs it out from a corner with electrifying pace and creates his own counter and then pings that ball like 50 yards to the other side of Jared. And there was a couple, he had one other break where he basically just took everybody on and almost, he had a pass there and he missed it. He opted to take the 1v1 and almost got through. But I just thought he was electric the entire match. I think at this point, West Ham has got to start finding a way to consistently put matches to bed that they should win, right? And I feel like this one, despite Newcastle being, tabbed this great team coming in a title contender, I think given the injuries and given where they're at and given the situation in this game, up 2 goals, that's 3 in the bag you got to put away.
Yeah, I mean, West Ham's playing better football than Newcastle right now, so therefore they need to win a game where they're up 3-1 on the road. So you should be able to control that without defending so far down that you allow a team to come back into it. The part about Newcastle, I agree with you. I think that the injuries, the European competition, obviously West Ham is also playing in the Europa League, and they've navigated that all season with a thin to medium squad. I think this is a prime example of, I think Newcastle is down because injuries, and I think they have a manager that they believe in and the players believe in, and you should move forward with. I don't think there's a player at West Ham who doesn't appreciate what David Moyes has done. There isn't a player at West Ham who won't always consider David Moyes one of their favorite managers and a special manager because they won a European competition together and they did all these great things. I think West Ham's hit the end of a cycle with David Moyes where I think there's too much talent. I'll give you an example, right? if West Ham had decided to move on from David Moyes at the end of last summer, when Declan Rice left for Villa for Arsenal, and they said we're going to just restart this, right? And they had hired Gary O'Neill. Do you think they'd be farther along right now as a club? Do you think they'd be playing better football with Lucas Paqueta and Bowen and Kudus and the defenders they have? Like they have, I think sometimes Moyes still holds them back because at his core, he knows what he does wins and is viable, and it's always worked. And I just think that they might be at the end of that run. I'll also tell you this right now, and I think this, as a Liverpool supporter, people will think this is me just kind of like throwing out sour milk or just kind of like taking a shot because that's what I like to do. I think West Ham is going to beat Leverkusen over 2 legs in the Europa League. Wow. I think they're going to go all in. I think they're set up perfectly to do it. I think they have the type of players that you don't see in the Bundesliga. I think Leverkusen plays a different style. I think when you play 3 at the back and you try to play with lots of possession, a team with guys like Kudus hitting, top form, I think Paqueta is arguably the best player at either club, to be totally honest. I think that West Ham has a legit shot. If they don't win the tie over 2 legs, I bet they're the first side this year to hang an L on Leverkusen, who hasn't lost in the Europa League or in the German Bundesliga. And I think it's what happens. And I think it's also kind of what happens when like this type of energy gets brought on any situation. It usually doesn't end well for the person who brought the energy on. And I think in some ways, Xavi saying I'm staying and I'm here, in some ways, I think takes a little of the pressure off, maybe even gets the players a little less up. And I think because now they're like thinking about winning the league. They're thinking about playing in Champions League with their manager next year. And I just don't know that this will be it for them. I think they are ripe for the picking at this moment. And I think you don't want a Premier League side, especially one that's a little plucky. And, if you really look at West Ham's time in Europe, the last like 2 or 3 seasons, it's been really, really successful. People forget they got all the way to the semifinals of the Europa League 2 years ago and lost to Barcelona the year before they went on and won the Europa League conference. Like they've had some good runs in Europe. So I think it could be interesting.
Yeah, it's so hard for me to evaluate them because I can't get past the fact that Moyes strikes me as like your like B-list manager, right? Like he I feel like he is like the guy that gets really good results from limited resources. But what does he do when he starts to have a surplus of anything, quality, talent, any of those things? Like that's where like I can't get over that mental hurdle. Like and I just don't know I don't know if he's got it in him to sort of take it aside into that next level. And I don't know, like, maybe that's just a limitation that I've placed on myself when I look at like my opinion of him, right? But that's just what I see. I just see that sort of like average to good manager. And I don't know where I see him sort of cresting and breaking through that. So it'll be interesting to see.
So before we get to Sunday's 2 feature kind of key matchups of the weekend, the only side to keep a clean sheet was Villa at home. Wolves failed to score on their travels to Villa Park, which isn't surprising seeing that Wolves is down almost as many players as Newcastle ×3 when it comes to attackers. And they were starting an 18-year-old kid who I couldn't pronounce his name if you gave me it in a thesaurus twice. So what does it say about the Premier League at this point, Paul, where we're getting all these goals? It is literally like historic levels of goals scored, goals per match. I think second lowest amount of clean sheets in the Premier League era. What is this down to? Is it down to the fact that tactics are just so much on the attacking side at this point? Rules are on the attacking side. Like, what is it down to that is making it so hard for these managers to set up semblances of defense?
My personal opinion is that just everybody has the legs run off them. And I know that goes both ways, right? Because you got to run the score, right? Like I know it goes both ways. I look at like this Brentford United match as an example, right? So it finishes 1-1. There's 40 shots in that match. 40 fucking shots in that match. And like you got those two goals out of that. And I like, to me, that's just tired. You know what I mean? Like, it just strikes me as people across the board have just been run ragged and are tired. I mean, maybe there's another explanation. To me, it just feels like we're getting some poor defenses. Like, games feel a little bit more wide open. There's a lot less, the exception of the rule here is like this, and funny because we build Sunday as the big day, but I think Sunday had the worst games, like the City Arsenal game was super cagey. No one wanted to really take a run or attack or risk anything because I think people are like thinking about having to get back, having to tuck tail and head back and run back and defend. And like, I think it's just part of it. I feel like teams are starting to get tired here across the board.
Well, you mentioned the snooze fest that was Man City 0, Arsenal 0. And there are some 0-0s that are actually fun football matches to watch. This was not one of them. This was almost the definition of paint drying with like a little bit of like paint drying with on the other side, there was like an immovable force, because when you have literally 73% possession over a football match, that's pretty ridiculous. So I don't want to start with City here. Because City, they were poor and they did not look like champions. They do not look like a team that's going to rip off all the wins and run down two teams ahead of them right now, yelling at each other on the pitch. Outside of Rodri, once again, being the best player by a mile. Because I just think at this point, he might just be that player in the Premier League. By a mile, he's the best player almost at his position above everybody else. It's not even close. But let's start with Arsenal here. I've seen it both ways. I've seen Arteta criticized by Arsenal media for not trying to win a match that could have won him the league in their mind. And I've seen him heralded for tactically, pantsing Pep Guardiola in his own yard in his own style. Where do you lie on this? Was this a smart coaching decision? Was this necessity? Or was this a little bit of nerves and fear playing into how he went about this match?
It's tough for me to like fault Arteta because like for every negative thing I could say about Arteta, I could say the same thing for Guardiola, right? So like I feel like, and if anything, I think that Guardiola almost had more of a reason to play this a little bit closer to the vest than Arsenal did. If I'm Arsenal, this is the most vulnerable City side that like we've seen in probably 6 to 7 years. Like if I'm Arsenal, I'm probably opening this up because for the first time you have the midfield to do it and you have a front three that is actually firing, right? This other 27% of the time that City didn't have the ball had to have been them trying to dink it into Holland. But I feel like Arteta has the tools and has the team to go ahead and have a go at the City side. I just think he was just scared to death of getting caught out, get pushed up and getting caught out, which ironically City doesn't have, like, outside of Doku, City doesn't have the top end pace to do what they've done in the past. Like they're not going to catch you on a court. Like they're not going to catch you out on a counter and rip 3 single passes down the field and score. Like that's not the side anymore. Like, can they do it on occasion? Yeah. But like, this isn't the same City side. And I think, they're so disjointed trying to get the ball to Holland. And there's so much sort of disconnection there. Like I really thought we could have seen, I was disappointed because I thought we could have seen more from Arsenal. I thought that they could have given us a better game. Part of me wants to credit them because I think the core of this team is defense for the first time in like a decade. Like this team is fairly good defensively and they have the midfield to sort of hold it together. So like I can kind of understand why they just kind of absorb that pressure and let City do that. I just thought this was a match they could have gone out and tried to win. Yeah,
I feel like they let City off the hook, to be honest. In some ways, they played into City's hands. They allowed City the opportunity to win the match by giving them 70% possession. Now, granted, I mean, some of these stats are just ridiculous. I mean, the fact that the passes were 700 to 269 is just ridiculous. I mean, that's a ridiculous stat. You expect that when you see City play like, Crystal Palace. You don't expect that against Arsenal. Obviously we at Liverpool, we played a very different match, and it was at Anfield, but I do feel like, we played a very similar match when we played them at City, but they would never have, 3-1 possession over us at any point ever. I mean, it's just not going to happen. We're going to at least attack and play and try. And I think what bothered me here is like, even just the 20 fouls, like they were just, Arsenal was tactically fouling all match long. They were basically chopping them down in all sections of the pitch. And it didn't feel to me like a team who believed they were in a title race. It felt like a team who felt like they had to sneak a result to stay in a title race. And I've questioned Arsenal's mentality for years, and part of it is just to poke fun, and part of it is because I really don't like Mikel Arteta, but I've had to give them credit as they've started to mature. This felt to me like this was a big, big step back for all of the Arsenal players, except for Saliba and Gabriel, who were the two best players on the pitch, I think, by a mile. Saliba specifically, I know sometimes we like to poke fun and people say things. He basically man-marked Haaland the entire match, and Haaland was nowhere to be found once again. And, it's amazing when you see the stats this year against the big six clubs, or at least on paper, the big six clubs. Arsenal's the only one with a win, which is insane. The rest are all draws, and Liverpool's lost to Arsenal. Arsenal's the only one with a victory in any of those big matches against each other. And I think it makes a lot of sense, because I think you're going to see a little bit more of that as this season rolls out. And I think that's where this is going to be really, really interesting. So let's go take a look at the table. And at the same time, we will talk a little bit about the Liverpool match yesterday with Brighton. So after the weekend, most teams in the top half, West Ham has played 30, so has Aston Villa. Everyone else has played 29. We have our midweek matches coming. Liverpool sits top of the table, 67 points, followed closely by Arsenal at 65, Manchester City at 64, followed then by Villa and Tottenham with a game in hand, just 3 points behind. So, Paul, when it comes to the Liverpool match, which I know you watched intently, your alarm clock worked, so you saw the opening kickoff.
Yeah.
That's gonna be fun tonight. I can't wait. We're gonna have to ask. Like, we should start with trivia about the first 5 minutes of the match.
To be fair, which is crazy, I probably go to bed like an hour before Tim does, which is just dumb. Anyway,
so what we saw from Liverpool on the weekend. Once again, helter-skelter, no rhyme or reason, give up an early goal, score a goal to get one back. You don't even know if it counts or not. Score another one, that's a worldie, then get one chalked off, never get the third. Is this signs of a champion? Or if we weren't supporters looking through rosy red glasses, would we say, if we really look at all these results this year, could this be fool's gold, and can this last for 9 more matches?
I mean, I think 30 matches in, you can probably get away from the fool's gold thing. I think This is a side that's just figuring it out as they go, right? And I think that's the crazy thing, is like, we're in uncharted territory with the amount of new players we have. And we know one thing. We know what the formation is going to be. We know what the general philosophy is going to be. And we know that we're going to make subs probably 10 minutes too late. So like
100%, if not 20.
So like, I mean, I think that's the thing, is like, we're continuing this concede first. We are, and then we're finding our way back in this thing. And I think, this team, the one thing that you can't credit this entire season to is that this team does genuinely believe it's going to come back and win no matter what. Just because like they've done it so many times. And like, they know that, like, if we concede, the good thing is the goal came so early, right? You got the entire match to get back in it. You just kind of had the feeling, given the amount of, when I talk about injuries, the amount of injuries Brighton had, you just know that, you just felt like if we continue to apply the pressure, that was eventually going to crack, right? But I think, that's the thing that makes you nervous. You're up 2-1. You can't find the third. Anything can happen with this referee crew. That's the nervy thing. In this Premier League, you got to go 2 up just to have that buffer against the other guys on the field that are apparently refereeing it.
Spurs and Villa both get wins. They stay, within touching distance of each other for top 4. Goal difference, we still have talked about for a while now how fifth may get a Premier League team into the Champions League this year, which feels kind of dirty, only because this isn't the year where England deserves 5 teams into the Champions League, which is kind of crazy to me that now is the time where they may actually give it to them. How big of a 2 points was United dropping those 2 points when it really comes down to the fact that, both Villa and Tottenham at times have looked nervy? There's an outside shot. If you could get all the way to 5th, you're in the Champions League spot. And United's giving up points in stoppage time after getting stoppage time winners.
Yeah, I thought it was massive because now you're asking this side who hasn't been consistent all year to go out and make up 9 points on the team in front of them. I don't know, man. Is it possible? Sure. Is it likely? Not for me. No.
Yeah, I really think I think this actually has the telltale signs. I think you're starting to hear all the reports about the different coaches that they're interested in bringing in and the reports coming out. I think Ten Hag knows the writings on the wall that he'll get till the end of the season and it's over for him. Maybe if they found a way to win the FA Cup, and we both know that's just ludicrous thinking, and they're not winning the FA Cup. Let's be real.
It just it's so weird because this team is so weird. And I had this there's a small part of me that there was a small part of me that wanted them to come out and play well against Brentford. Because how do you explain that FA Cup thing? How do you explain that? It doesn't make any sense.
That's like Liverpool showing up when they were a mid-table or bottom half of the first half league and showing up against the United team at home and putting in a blinder of a performance because it was their whole season for their supporters. We genuinely made their year, and then they went on the road, found a Mason Mount winner in the 90+6, and then found a way to let Brentford score without a striker hitting the back of the net. That's the craziest part. It wasn't even it was some worldy goal. It was just ridiculous. United being United. So
completely.
Let me ask you this, Paul, before we look down at the bottom of the table and then preview next week's matches before wrapping up here. Come May 23rd, if we do one of these shows, hopefully hungover from a crazy night of celebrating, where do you see this table shaking out? Talk to me about that top 5 and what will be different, if anything, on the last day of the season.
God, we do this every week, and it's hard to find any sort of variance on this thing. I think the one that you could watch, right? I think the one that you could watch here would be Tottenham and Villa, just because I think Villa is dipping a little bit, and Tottenham seems to be finding something. So if they can work out, I still think it's a little bit. I still think they're trying to figure out how to play with Son as their main guy, right? I mean, I think it's still a little bit disjointed. Madison didn't have a great week, but I think they'll, the Van de Ven kid's healthy again. He's coming back, so I think they're going to get stronger defensively. I could see them making a move here, a push here, and pushing past Villa possibly. I also could see City catching Arsenal. I think those two are the most likely to happen. Other than that, I don't see a ton of movement here. I mean, you could see some things down low, like here in the Newcastle Brighton area, but I feel like that stacks up pretty good.
I'm going to put this on the record. So you're telling me on April 1st, and it's not a Fool's Day joke, you believe Liverpool is winning this league? You said
You know
it.
what?
I asked you.
You know what? I'm gonna go out there. Listen. You baited me right into there. That was well done. I gotta say, watching Arsenal and City, like both those teams are like, listen, like I know that Liverpool is not as high flying as we ask, right? But like I just feel like Arsenal and City are so far off it. Like neither one of those teams seem to me like teams that I'm necessarily. Concerned isn't the right word, right? Like, I just think that we're better than those teams. And that's crazy because I don't think this is a particularly like amazing Liverpool side. Like, I don't think this is one of our best sides over the last, 4 or 5 years, but I think they're good enough. And I think they're that much better than Arsenal City that I feel comfortable where we're at. And I think that, like if I had to put money on it, I would put money on them to hang on.
Yeah. I think with the 2-point lead, knowing you don't have to play either of them again, Arsenal has a much tougher run in. I mean, we can all clown on United all we want. Arsenal has to go to United in match week 37. And if you think United, even if it means us winning the league, isn't going to stop Arsenal from winning the league if they can, like this is the thing, like Arsenal was a big shit for a long time. And people who haven't watched this game for all this time, like they forget what those Wenger years were like. And it's still a big deal to stop them from winning. And I think that sometimes in our Discord channel, we'll hear like the Arsenal hatred come out. And some people are like, I don't get it. I like watching Arsenal play. And they're like, you don't remember them winning, do you? Because when they won, they were almost as insufferable as United. I said almost. And I think that everyone talks about the Chelsea winning teams. Everybody knew what those were. Those were the store-bought products that would be good for 2 years and then would be bad for 2 years, and it'd be easy to laugh at them. So you can just overlook it. You're like, all right, Eden Hazard's player of the year. Next year he'll be dog shit. No one will care about him, and they'll want to sell him. Like, that's how the league was. It wasn't that way when Arsenal and United were great.
Right.
And I don't think anyone wants to see Arsenal get back to that level. I think you made a good point. I think Liverpool has shown that if there's 4 or 5 minutes left to go in a match and you need 2 goals to win the league, they're the team that has the fire and the drive to go do it. Right. Arsenal has proven that they can score 5-6 goals against bottom fodder teams, and they can destroy the Sheffield Uniteds and the Lutons on back-to-back weeks. I think Liverpool's proven with their late game heroics against Newcastle, with the late game heroics against Forest, just the things that they've been able to do, even the tying the game late against Luton. I think they've proven that they're not out of any match and that they still have, in their opinion, the best match winners. So teams that need some match winners, they're the ones at the bottom of the table. And it's starting to shape up like quite the relegation battle. And I'd say at this point, it's 4 for 1. And I know you've been sucking them into it for a while. I've said they were safe, but I'll pull Brentford into it at this point. If you can only get 2 draws over 5 matches playing in this league with these dregs, which one of these teams stays up? Which one of these teams goes down? And which one of these teams do you think has the most to worry about?
I think with the team with the most to worry about is Everton, because I feel like if they go down, they're going to be in a really, really bad spot with a new stadium, financial restrictions, possible more punishment coming. I feel like they're in a really, really bad spot. Just from like a health standpoint, like a club health standpoint.
I agree. That was what I was asking. Yeah. So you answered it right.
Yeah, and I think, if I'm looking at any of these sides, obviously Brentford statistically has got the best odds out of here. But like, I think if you're Luton Town, you got to be really, really happy that you're within 3 points of 2 teams, because I think Luton has the ability to scrap some draws together. Forest has always been good because they could find goals, but those goals are starting to dry up a little bit, and at the worst time of year too. So if you're Luton, I think they could possibly escape out of this. I think which would be wild. And I really think if you're any of these teams, I think the one that has to feel absolutely sick with with like your heart and your stomach, it's got to be Everton.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I still, for whatever reason, and they have a brewer running. Like Everton's running. Like Everton has to get a win. I don't think they've won a match in like
which made the 90 injury time like own goal from the guy that's been with you and been one of your best players for like 2 decades. That was just absolutely brutal.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm with you there. I still feel like somehow they just like a cockroach find a way to just make it through the Holocaust. Like it's just like what they do. Like it doesn't matter what happens, they will be here. Forrest, you made a great call a few weeks back, talking about how Nuno was just the worst type of manager for this. He might not be the worst manager for Forrest, but he was the worst manager for a relegation battle. And I really do agree because it just never feels like they have any form of urgency. My issue is, I would love for Luton to stay up. I would love for Rob Edwards to stay up. Kelly would love it if Rob Edwards and his boyish looks would stay up. But they find ways to lose matches. And I think they have lost so many points from positive situations, from the Spurs match to earlier in the season to they were beating Arsenal in the 88th minute and found a way to lose. They've had so many, the Liverpool match, they've had so many opportunities, not just against the big clubs, against the small clubs, losing to Sheffield United at home. As much as I see them scrappy and fighting, I just see at the end the big boys just figuring out a way to get a point or two more. I hope I'm wrong because I hate when those same 3 teams come up, go back down, because this could be 3 that go down and we don't see again for a long time. Yeah. Luton's best chance of being a Premier League team was almost doing the Huddersfield and finding a way to miraculously staying up your first year, building on it, staying up a second year, and then Huddersfield couldn't make it the third year, and then they've been toiling in the middle of the championship since. And I feel like Luton might very well find themselves back in that exact same fortune. We will see. Who will not probably see their fortunes change? That is Chelsea. They will probably stay the best of the rest. And by the rest, I mean the teams that nobody actually pays attention to or cares about for the rest of the season. So we look ahead to next week's fixtures. They come, well, people, tomorrow. This is a midweek match week, so we have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, full Premier League slate. Tomorrow you have Newcastle, Everton, Forest, Fulham, Burnley, Wolves, Bournemouth, Palace, and West Ham, Tottenham. Obviously, the West Ham, Tottenham is probably the one from the table standpoint that jumps out at people. Which one would you be tuning into, Paul, of course, if you weren't going to be diligently at work?
Probably City Villa, because I'm not convinced Villa can't get something from that match, which has huge title race implications. I think they're well in the mix to do so, and that will be interesting for me. And then, of course, that last one, Chelsea United, has the capability of just being a horrendous car wreck to watch.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on the Villa City, obviously, for personal reasons and title implications. I also think it's very interesting to see what happens if City were to drop or lose like a random ass match. Like, let's say that Crystal Palace tie, a team that's been a bogey team for them the last few years, and it comes right in between 2 big ass Champions League matches against Real Madrid, and they lose 3 points in that match and maybe drop a couple points here against Villa in a draw. Like, I would be extremely interested to see what this City team would look like if they were out of the title race completely, 7-8 points off. I don't know that they actually have the focus currently, because I don't think they have a captain. I don't think they have actual leaders. Like, I think this City team's actually in real flux, which is why Pep has tried to really do some like masterful coaching and like just rotating of who's important at times. Like, it's not his style. He likes to play everyone all the time. He's done a lot different. He's played Haaland almost every minute. He's played Foden almost every minute. He completely buried Alvarez and then didn't bring him on at all against Arsenal when he needed an attacking presence to change the game. Just feels like there might be a little bit of dissension there. And maybe it's just the romantic in me who thinks there's a way that Girona finishes second. And then Manchester City either has to sell Girona or can't play in the Champions League, because starting next year, if you own multiple clubs, only the team that finishes higher in their domestic league can play in the Champions League. How beautiful would it be if City can't play in the Champions League because they own 4 youth players at Girona that they've been stashing there for 3 seasons so they don't have to pay taxes on them. 116 charges, and you can stay home or watch it in the Europa League. Just things that make me happy. And, of course, Liverpool has no problem with Sheffield United at home, right, Paul? I mean, you're telling me that's right, Paul, right?
Nothing makes me more nervous than seeing a fixture like this. Really does. But, yeah, I mean, I think let's put it this way, right? You drop points here, you don't deserve to win the league. Let's make it simple.
That is 100% couldn't have been said better. I'll say something better. If you haven't already, get on over to the YouTube channel right now. Give that page a subscription. Leave us a comment. Don't forget to check us out on Instagram, X. I think we're on TikTok, though. The youngins tell me that is something. I can't go on it because I feel like, well, because it's blocked from most of the computers and programs that I have, therefore it's probably something I shouldn't use my spare time on. In all seriousness, we appreciate all of your feedback, comments, likes, shares, and replies. For myself and Bickler, thank you for another edition of the Premier League Show. We'll be back for you next Monday, previewing Week 32, recapping Week 31, and hopefully still talking about Liverpool top of the table. All right, everyone, have a great week, and thanks for the ride.